Welcome to Andrea Lake 101. This episode is Sticker Wars. Oh my God, you guys. We went a little bit viral since I talked to you last. Yeah, we did. We released an updated version of StickerGate because our good friend over at Sticker Mule, the CEO of Sticker Mule, is in fact running for Congress. He sure is. He has really made politics an integral part of his business. They have a 100-foot long Vote for Trump sign on the roof of their corporate headquarters. That is wild. That was wild to me when they did it. It is wild still today. And clearly he has an agenda to run for Congress and also to bring back the R word, as we thoroughly just like to remind people every week, because we're very much like, what are you doing? That is so strange. And so I created this reel, and I actually thought about reaching out to Anthony because I have a concept for a TV show that kind of shows both sides of the sticker wars. And I think it would be great. I think that guy is built for television. I do. We do not agree on hardly anything. And so I just thought, look, the people that own sticker companies have really big personalities. I have a really big personality. There's a reason that I was fucking a villain on reality TV show. Anthony has a really big personality, and do we poke fun here and there? Yeah, but the dude is a semi-pro fighter. He can fucking take a punch, okay? And he's running for Congress. He's going to be real use to people pointing out anything that he does. And he's saying some incredibly, incredibly, profoundly, mind-blowingly polarizing things that sometimes I'm like, I don't know if he knows how polarizing they are. I don't know. Just the facts, ma'am. They're polarizing. To say that people who don't agree with Donald Trump are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, that is wild. That is a hot take. That is something that I would really, really, really go ahead and disagree with. So we put out this reel and, it caught traction. A content creator that we have communicated with before, Tizzy ENT, he shared it immediately. Thanks, Tizzy. And several other content creators as well. And we're like, look, you guys, we are right here at Sticker Junkie. We are absolute allies of the LGBTQ community. We are absolute allies with having equality in the workplace, with having diversity in the workplace. I hire the most qualified person for the job, and I didn't have hardly any money. When I was starting back out, I mean, I was advertising jobs for $18 an hour when I came back in the door. And now, we pay like $22 to $27 an hour basically because that's what we can afford. And as we continue to increase our sales, we will continue to increase that salary. But a lot of people that were applying were women and were people of color, and were especially women of color, because they were just used to applying for jobs that paid lower dollar amounts. And as a result, we have a humongous percentage. I think we're like 70% women and 70% people of color. I have to run the exact numbers, but that sounds right. And I just hired the best person for the job. Period. I don't care if they're a man or a woman. I don't care. I don't care what race they are. And I do find that people who have had to work 5 times as hard to get their foot in the door are, generally speaking, going to be really fucking good once their foot is in the door. But all of my people are good, regardless of sex, regardless of race, regardless of sexual preference. So you just have this option of a company over here with real ass human beings who actually read your emails and actually answer your phone and are not outsourcing stuff to AI. And so we're winning clients over the old fashioned way. Our customer service is extraordinary, and that has been one of the biggest things in our whole company, because if somebody has an issue, we are going to solve it. The quantity of relief that I feel, especially from some of our larger clients and agencies that come over to us, they're like, holy shit, your team is hyper responsive. If they need something tweaked, if they need some artwork adjusted, if they need something done that's like a little extra or a little special, that it's just going to be done immediately, and it's going to be done right. And if it's not done right, we're going to fix it. So anyhow, let's round out StickerGate. So this reel goes a little bit viral, which I was super thankful for. And all of a sudden we have a bunch more calls with a bunch of influencers and a bunch of people who are very, very interested in getting in on our affiliate deal that we have, which is really hyper crafted for the particular type of influencers that we're talking about. And it's set up way different than other affiliate deals. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because my competition watches this, as well they should. A bunch of different people from a bunch of different sticker companies watch this podcast. There's room enough for everybody. $42 billion space. There's not even a supplier right now that could handle 100% of the market share. Now, is it a saturated space? Yes. But we're sort of over here looking at a lot of large clients that we're in communication with, that we're talking to right now, that we're going after right now, that we're closing right now. And so we are delighted when anything StickerGate comes up. And I do have this concept for this TV show, and I do have a lot of MAGA people in my universe. You know, I have a lot of friends that I grew up with that turned MAGA. I have family members who are MAGA. And I did grow up in the 80s, and I want us all to remember there are economic problems that we need to fix. And the more that we are convinced by the algorithm that we should be screaming and yelling and arguing nonstop with each other, that's not going to get us anywhere. And it's incredibly tempting to become polarized against someone, and really frequently, because I'll say something that shouldn't be controversial, has become controversial. If you are in the Epstein files, you should go to prison. I don't care who you are. That shouldn't even be a controversial statement. But right now, we're so far away from each other, and people are defending things that are indefensible. And it's wild. We are wilding out as a country right now. And we have been convinced to scream at each other for the last 40 years about abortion, to scream at each other for the last 30 years about vaccines, to scream at each other for the last forever about one thing or another, instead of saying, hey, look, let's go ahead and get those boring ass economists that I talked about in the last episode. Let's get them into the office. Let's fix the budget. Let's make it so your grocery bill isn't skyrocketing right now. So when you have 67% of the country that is scraping by, that is making less than $60,000 a year, that does not have enough extra, that needs to work 2 or 3 jobs, that doesn't have enough extra to take their kids to the zoo, that can't even take a day off to take their kids to the zoo. And we have this mythology of hyper reliance of well, that's your fault that you can't afford to pay your kids. And I'm like, is it? Or is it the fault of a system who has allowed corporations to get away with paying poverty wages to their employees? That needs to be fixed at a governmental level, period. And in the interim, all of us can support companies that internally fix that ourselves, that just say, hey, look, $19 an hour is a poverty wage. We need to normalize people hearing that because, as I have mentioned before, to a boomer or a Gen Xer, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like $19 actually should be enough to live. It sounds like somebody maybe is exaggerating. And when I tell you the God's honest truth, if I had not totally lost my money and had to go see what it was like to survive on no spending budget, I would never have understood how expensive it is to live. If I never had to move and see how high the rents are right now, they are astounding. And while that is exaggerated in Southern California, that is true everywhere. If you remember back to last week's episode, Jackson, Mississippi is doing the worst. You are still running at a loss. If you have 2 full-time jobs, you still cannot afford to live in Jackson. And that's if you can find the work. So the country is really not working for 67% of the population. What happens then is that the middle class gets reduced, right? Then I'm like, okay, you guys, this is such a bad idea. Who the fuck is going to buy the products that you're selling when there's no more middle class? This is how the economics of this breaks down. Now, again, remember, I know that I'm the sticker chick, but you longtime listeners, you know that I owned the exclusive sales rights, exclusive. That did not suck. On Minecraft, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, Walking Dead. That means that I had a company that was doing $40 million in annual revenue in those peak years, which of course meant that I was invited into all the biggest business groups in the world. And so I'm seeing the inside of all of these rooms. And I'm seeing the mentality inside of all of these rooms. I talked about it when I went to the Milken Institute, which is also called the Global Economic Institute. And I was seeing these hedge fund managers and these private equity managers that are talking about getting their 7 basis points. If your private equity fund is worth $100 billion, that means that you're expected to add an additional $7 billion to your bottom line that year. So you're worth $107 billion the following year. And those numbers get exponentially out of control really, really, really quick. That's why, like, there's consolidators that are snapping up every veterinary clinic, every dentist office, everything. And to a lot of people, that's their dream exit. Like when they start an entrepreneurial venture and they sell to private equity, that's what they're looking for. That's their out. That's their I've made it. That's their retirement plan. And a lot of people don't have any retirement plan for anyone in their business but themselves. They don't have a retirement exit strategy for all of their employees. With us at Sticker Junkie, I'm not selling Sticker Junkie. I have said this before, but I have never finished the articulation of it clearly because I do get off in the weeds. Once I make my number, and it is a high number, but once I hit that number and I am taken care of and my family is taken care of and my friends are taken care of and my employees are taken care of, I will figure out a structured walking away from Sticker Junkie, and I will not give a fuck what my financial reward from walking away from that is. And it will absolutely not include selling to a private equity fund. It just won't. I don't want to do that. That is not my plan because I don't want to be part of this system that is just fucking over individual people. Like, it just requires a lot of unwinding, though, and it's very hard to unwind something that is already established in a certain way. But the more that we are idolizing this greed sort of super success sort of billionaire status, which is why it's wild that this is called the making of a billionaire. But if you just keep growing your companies, you will become a billionaire. That is what happens. When I say like super casually, like, oh, I would just reallocate that means that I would just give the money, pour the money back into the communities in which I do business. And the more money that I have, the wider and wider and wider and wider of a community that I would pour money back into. And I don't understand why everyone forgets that we actually live in a community. And when you rob a community of the middle class, they stop spending money. Well, most of the ultra wealthy, like once you hit a certain point, you're not spending all the money that you're taking in. A person in the middle class, if they are, let's say it costs $60,000 to just baseline get by, right? That would be in Chicago, you would be doing fine. You wouldn't be super thriving, but you would be doing fine if you were making 60 grand in Chicago. Instead of 60 grand, if that person makes 90,000, that is a whole lifestyle difference. That is like easily being able to afford to send your kid to whatever camp that they wanted to go to take them to a professional sports game on the weekend, to go to the zoo, to just like have a fun time with your family, to baseline afford to live. That's where you can start thinking about saving money to buy a house, just all of the, have a kid, all of the normal things that people would want. So as we're squeezing the middle class and really making the middle class virtually non-existent by paying poverty wages, continuing to pay poverty wages, the middle class spends as much money as they make. Even the upper middle class basically spends as much money as they make. And they're socking away money for retirement savings because there's enough to do that. But the gazillionaires, if you're making 400 million bucks, even if you're spending $50 million of that a year, that means you're throwing $350 million just into some long-term secured annuity or secured asset investment that you're not going to really be selling or moving around, that you're not going to really be contributing much with. You're just going to be throwing it into this pile of money. That's why the stock market does great, even when people are literally, legitimately starving. Because the money has been segmented in such a way where the ultra wealthy, they don't really feel it anymore when the economy is bad. So the destruction of middle class truly is the destruction of the country, of the economy. Like a thriving middle class creates a truly, truly, truly thriving country. Because if they have extra, they're going to go see family that's across the country that they couldn't afford to go see before, buy a new car, buy a home, etc., and invest back into their family. Where right now we have all of these dollars pouring into just stagnant money that's going to go into some offshore account, that's going to go into something that's just not feedering back into the economy and is also not, abso-fucking-lutely not, creating a whole bunch of jobs. The math is not mathing. The math is not mathing for this ever turning around or becoming a thriving economy. And then we have the big, big, big baddie issues, right? That I've touched upon before, like healthcare. And people just sort of feel helpless with healthcare, of like, of course, because it is a helpless situation. And then everybody is throwing out bumper sticker solutions that don't work. And a whole lot of people are not understanding what the actual issue is. So one of the reasons, obviously greed is a factor, of course, I'm not saying that it's not. There's many, many factors as to why healthcare is so expensive. But one of the biggest ones is these very outsized lawsuits. When you have a huge class action lawsuit that's going to have to pay out billions of dollars because of side effects from a new pharmaceutical thing, or these hundreds of millions of dollar settlements every time that there's an actual just accident in a hospital or somebody just actually makes a mistake, and there's a $100 million payout, $70 million payout, $200 million payout, every time that happens, guess who pays for that, right? All of us. All of us pay for that. That's why they charge you $50 fucking dollars to get a Tylenol in a hospital. It's because of the outsized lawsuits they know that they're going to have to pay out on. Now, why is there so much theft and greed and corruption in the insurance space? Yeah, that's a really fucking good question. We pay billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in this society for healthcare. We, with our tax dollars, pay billions of dollars for healthcare. And instead of properly allocating our money into healthcare, it's not fucking free healthcare. I'm so tired. Actually went a little bit viral on Threads. Oh yeah, I did. I can't remember exactly what it says, so I'm going to read it to you. Friendly reminder, no one is asking for free healthcare. We want a proper allocation of our actual tax dollars. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Little snarky. It was Sunday. I was like, oh, I have to start Snarky Sunday. Hashtag Snarky Sunday. I want to make that a thing because it was a Sunday morning. And I was reading this crazy shit where people were talking about like, well, that person doesn't pay taxes, so they shouldn't have healthcare. I'm like, whoa, you guys, are you fucking kidding me right now? What? So it's not the dudes that just got a $1 trillion tax cut that are the problem. They're not the problem. It's the single mom who like literally it costs her more to go to work than she makes at work. And so she's on public assistance instead because financially it literally makes more sense for her to collect public assistance because we, as a country, those rich ass wealthiest people in the country have just totally okayed the fact that we are allowed to pay poverty wages as our minimum wage. There is not a county in the entire country where you can afford to live on the poverty wage that is minimum wage. It is $7.25 an hour. There is nowhere in the country that you can afford to live on a 40-hour-a-week job that pays $7.25 an hour. It doesn't exist. And so the diversion that the billionaires who own every source of media that every single person consumes are getting us to just fight with each other, to argue with each other, to punch downward, to blame the poorest people in the country for the fact that 67% of the country is making a fucking struggle bus wage or lower. It's the biggest con of all times. And people on both sides are fighting over things that are super important to fight over. That's why it's easy to distract people with them. Obviously, people should be able to love whoever they want to love. Obviously, people should be able to go by their own moral compass and their own internal beliefs. They should not have somebody else's religion put on them. They should not have somebody else's beliefs put on them. I don't care which religion it is. They should baseline be respectful of each other. There's so many things in this country that we have just lost the thread on, right? If somebody falls down and hurts themselves really badly right in front of you on the sidewalk and their groceries are spilled everywhere and they've skinned their knees and they just tripped over something, most of us are going to rush over to help them. We're not going to fucking ask them who they voted for. But we have this really hostile environment where it's an attention economy, where anger gets more clicks, and where people are just screaming at each other all the time. And we have got to stop that. We have got to. We have got to identify what the biggest problems are in our society, which right now is economics, and go solve them. We need to solve long term. I saw this thing. It was Elizabeth Warren. It just came up on my feed. I am not a Democrat. And she said, we have to do XYZ so that we can lower the cost for the average American who's struggling. And I'm like, that is the wrong answer. We do not need to artificially continue to lower costs. Inflation is a normal thing that happens. We need to increase the salary of everyone. Everyone should be making 4 to 5 times as much as they were 20 years ago. So really often, like when I'm talking about the baseline salaries or the baseline living wage of $32, I also mean that somebody that was making $20 an hour 4 years ago should be making $80 an hour now. And spoiler alert, they're not. And we have got to fix that in order to have a thriving economy. Like, why is it okay that a CEO's salary went from an average salary of like $250,000 20 years ago, and now today it's $25 million, but your salary has only gone from $35 to $50? If you're making $35 an hour 20 years ago, you should be making at least 4 times as much. So you should be making at least $140 an hour now. And that has to be the common way that we get people to catch up to think it is not okay that it's only the ultra wealthy whose salary has really increased basically at all. And in the case of the minimum wage, at all. Like, it's nuts that the minimum wage hasn't gone up in 16 years. And when it did go up last time, it barely baby went up. It didn't go up by enough to even compensate for inflation then. So if we continue to just elect people who are not doing a good job. Congress is not doing a good job. Now they can't even agree whether or not we should arrest pedophiles. That seems like if you can't baseline agree that anyone of any political party who's in the Epstein files, what the fuck are we doing? What the fuck are we doing? Because everyone that I talk to is like, oh, Epstein files, jail. I don't care. I don't care. I saw one that said, I don't care if Mr. Rogers is in the Epstein files, jail. I was like, yep, that sounds exactly right. That shouldn't be polarizing. It shouldn't be, but it is. And so that's where we've landed as a country. So when we baseline lose the thread of being able to even have a dialogue, we are lost to this world. But what I'm finding out, especially after having taken a 4-week just total no social media break, is I talked to a bunch of my friends, a bunch of them. I talked to friends on all sides of the whole political spectrum. And guess what? All of them think everyone in the Epstein files should go to prison. So it's just only Congress, and specifically the Republican members of Congress, who are protecting people in the Epstein files. And their defense now is like, well, why didn't Obama release them? And I'm like, good fucking question. He absolutely should have. Why didn't Biden release them? Good fucking question. He absolutely should have. No argument here. They should have been released whole long time ago. But now that it's coming up right now, let's release it now. That shouldn't be controversial. But we have gotten to a point where we're so polarized that people aren't even really having conversations anymore. And to make matters worse, you have the bots on the dead internet. A lot of people, when they're arguing on the internet, they do not realize that AI is sophisticated enough that most likely you're not arguing with a real person. And if you had an attack that just where somebody sounded cuckoo pants crazy off the wall, it certainly is possible that they in fact are cuckoo pants crazy off the wall. However, most likely you're just arguing with a bot and not a real person. Because when I talk to people one-on-one, everyone I talk to is tired of the division. They're exhausted. They don't want to be fighting with people anymore. And they really, 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 really want the economy to be fixed. And we're seeing that everywhere. So what do all of those politics have to do with sticker wars? Yeah, good question. It's impossible not to pay attention to politics these days, just about, because it is ubiquitously everywhere. And the economy is having out of control inflation right now. Prices are going up week on week, and we all see it happening. Well, that means people are spending a little bit less. And it means we have to run a whole lot faster to secure more sales. So in our case, we are in fact running twice as fast, and we are negotiating really large deals right now that are going to put us ahead for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. Now, again, I really can't say what those are. I really cannot, because my competitors do watch this. So as we're running our little tails off over at StickerGate, you guys, I am almost at the end of that promise to myself of I'm going to work all day, every day for 27 months. Last month, I got confused on my timeline and I thought that 11/9 was the last day of the 27 months. I don't even know how I got that confused. I have it in my phone, it's marked on my calendar. Actually, December 9th is the last day of the 27 months of just working all day, every day. Right now, it is 7 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning. I began working the moment that I woke up. I was working until about 7 o'clock last night. I only have 3 more weeks of doing this. And the reason that I did this is because I knew that's how long it would actually take to turn around a broken company and turn it into a thriving company. And because of the recession that we're currently in, that's been way harder. It's way harder to grow a company during a recession because all of our regular clients, of course, are buying slightly less. That means that we have to onboard twice the amount of clients that we otherwise would have. So every interaction, new interaction that we have with a new influencer that we're working with, every new client that we onboard, every new touch point that we have with our customers is really, really helping us to ramp up our sales through these really, really tight economic times. And now I can see like we have an alleyway to true success. We are launching 2 new products in the next 2 months. I will tell you about them as they launch. And we're having a really good time still over at the Sticker Junkie offices. I'm just so excited. We had one of our vendors come in this week and they were meeting with our production crew, and our production crew was asking them incredibly detailed technical questions because the degree of excellence of everyone on my staff is high. And Dana is our lead mechanic and night manager, and she fucking knows her ways around the inside and outside mechanics of our equipment. Dave is our daytime production manager, who also knows the inside and outside mechanics of our equipment. Brian, our chief operations officer, incredibly handy guy, who has also learned the inside and outside mechanics of the equipment. So when we have somebody come in, our staff is like asking all of the right questions, whether that is for materials, for equipment, for suppliers, for software, for UX, UI. And it's so impressive to see Dave and Dana and my team interfacing with techs who are just like, whoa, I never get this. Like, I never get this opportunity to explain this in this much depth. We're so excited to work with you. We're excited to come back and bring in this new system. We're streamlining our postage as well with a new software system. So there's just so much going on that has to go on in order for us to continue that next trajectory of growth as we expand to get to that $10 million mark. And it's just a wild ride. Again, I read all the comments right now. I'm paying a lot of attention. If you have a business question, please ask it to me. I will be very happy to answer it. And that's going to do it for me for this episode of Sticker Wars. I do want to say I'm going to tuck back into old school habits. I can't recommend it strongly enough. I can't recommend strongly enough going to bed without a phone in your hand. I can't recommend strongly enough setting up a morning routine where you don't touch your phone for the first thing in the morning. Some days I struggle with that because I am a crypto trader. And so I do want to see if anything has sank or risen overnight. Spoiler alert, it's gone down. It seems as if it might. I said a few days ago, it seems as if it might collapse. The knees might go out from under it. And since then, the market is down 35%. That does sound right to me. However, I still personally am like, oh, there might be a super spike, but it's why I have a long-term plan in trading. It doesn't matter if it falls to the floor. It doesn't matter if the crypto market goes down 90%. As a matter of fact, I plan my portfolio around the fact that the crypto market likely will go down 90%. And I plan my whole trading strategy around being patience oriented, around knowing how far the market actually can go down, and around putting money in as much as I can when the market goes really low and selling it when it goes really high. There is nothing secret about that. That's a secret to trading success for a long, long time. But it's been wild just to watch what's happening in the world right now. I think all of us just think, how can this all possibly be happening? How can this possibly be real? I think that almost every day. And so as I get overwhelmed, I find that I only really get overwhelmed when I'm going into social media. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, you're sticking your head in the sand and this and that. And I'm like, no, I still hear about everything when I'm not on social media. It's just on social media, the algorithm is incentivized to make people hate each other because that gets your attention for longer. And then when people are arguing with each other on the internet, that doesn't accomplish anything except for infuriating each other. And then everybody thinks like they have this like gotcha moment. And instead of having a dialogue, an actual real dialogue about like how are we going to change this, whatever it is that we don't like about this country, it's just people trying to get in one-line zingers. I'm a slogan writer. I understand how compelling that can be. But I'm really just like you guys. Let's, as a whole unit, get together and figure out how to allocate our dollars, our tax dollars, so they're not getting funneled $1 trillion of tax incentives and tax breaks to multi-billionaires and multi-billion-dollar corporations. That's not where our tax dollars should be going. That does not increase jobs. That does not help out the economy at all whatsoever. The United States government is already running at a multiple $1 trillion loss in tax rates. We already are only collecting $5.5 trillion and we're spending about $7.1 or $7.2 trillion annually. Yeah, so I don't know where the fuck the government thinks we're going to come up with that additional $1 trillion in loss that we're going to have because we, for no reason whatsoever, at all whatsoever, just gave a $1 trillion tax break to the ultra wealthy. That doesn't make any sense, period. So we just need to like start having long-term regulated solutions in the United States. Otherwise, it is going nowhere good fast. It's going nowhere good really fast. And I want it to go somewhere good. I really do. I love the United States. I don't want to move out of the United States. I've lived here my whole life and I really, really like it. And so I really hope that we get some long-term, good feeling politicians who are not just going to sneak little lines and bills at the last minute and give themselves payouts, which is happening all the time. The thing I think that's the most wild to me about the United States is like, look, you guys, I didn't have a television for 20 years. So I actually wasn't influenced by the slow like frogs in a boiling pot of water who started listening to commentators on air quotes news. There is no news going on television anymore. It's not the way that it used to be where it's a reporting of facts. I didn't see the evolution of like actual just this is what happened today into what it is now, which is just a bunch of commentators saying things that mostly are untrue about different bills that are up in Congress. Except for that, you can actually just go read the bill. And so it's very clear that people are lying as they're commentating on television or even worse on social media. It's much worse on social media and just saying stuff that is in a moment easily provably untrue. And it's like living in the upside down right now. It's like living in the twilight zone. And there was a huge advantage to not being a frog in the boiling pot of water and not watching commentators at all whatsoever. And then all of a sudden just seeing them, 25 years later and being like, whoa, what you said is really just untrue. And you can just go read that report, or you can go read that lawsuit, or you can go read that bill. It's just right there. It's just right there in writing that anybody can go read. But who has time to do that? No one. Why? Because they're struggling and because we are paying people a poverty wage. That is on purpose. It is way easier to run away with the whole piggy bank when everybody else is distracted fighting with each other, thinking they hate their neighbor or they hate their family member because they don't agree on abortion. It's way easier to do. It's way easier to run away with all the dollars when everybody else is broke and struggling and distracted. So let's just fix all that. Let's just get boring ass people in office. It is the answer. As much as I've rolled it around in my head and summed it up, that really is the answer. Another bright and shiny Sticker Wars episode. Next week on the pod, we are going to do a Fireside Friday. Oh, it's going to be a surprise special guest, but I'll tell you what. As always, grab your wine, grab your popcorn, and I will come strong with all of the tea. I'll see you next time on Andrea Lake 101, The Making of a Billionaire.